Friends, welcome into another edition of the Soccer Tejas Podcast. I'm Alex Parra. It's always great to be with you. A lot to talk about in this latest edition. We appreciate all of you following us. And it's not just about Uncle Alex talking to you, but two people that count will certainly be joining me. Why don't we welcome in the rest of the team, the rest of the group. You see him on screen now. We'll go first with Sir, El Señor Victor Araiza. Victor, first of all, welcome in. How are you? Good day.
Well, don't make me feel too young, Alex. Always a pleasure to be on here with you, with Laura as well, and talking about our beautiful game as we always do every week.
Every week we try to be as consistent as possible. And Victor mentioned the one and only Laura Gomez. Laura, welcome. Good afternoon, good day, good evening. How are you?
Good. How about you guys? I hope that your day has been going well. Fun-filled soccer news, of course, as always.
As always. And we're in October, the spooky month, by the way. I like October. Laura, you're a big Halloween fan?
I am. I'm a big Halloween and Christmas fan, which contradict each other, but that's my vibe.
Do you dress up a lot? Look at Victor. Victor's in costume tonight, so
I do. Victor's always in costume all year. We know this all year. But yes, I do like to dress up. We do like family themed dress up. So this year is Spider-Man.
Yeah, well, Victor likes to dress up too, but that's for another day and another time. But he also wears costumes. Why don't we start with Victor, by the way? Victor, you had the opportunity to be in Austin as the U.S. men's national team actually starts another era, the era of Mauricio Pochettino. It's energizing to have a change, but also the clock is ticking. We'll talk about how we're less than 2 years from the upcoming World Cup. But Victor, what did you see? What did you hear? How was your trip to Austin?
Good. Good to have the U.S. men's national team here in the Lone Star State, first of all. And I think that's part of the story, right? I think we've seen Austin now in this rotation of cities that the U.S. men's national team is visiting more frequently. More so than Houston and Dallas were getting, I think, before that. So that's part of it. I believe fifth win for the U.S. men's national team at Q2 Stadium. As you mentioned, the first game of the Pochettino era. It's coincidentally, right? The Hispanic Heritage Month match. But it is a Hispanic coach here getting a start in this. And I think that's part of the story as well. Certainly when you see the press conferences, communicates much better in Spanish. And I think that's going to be part of the things that maybe some things will get lost in translation. I know Pochettino speaks a bit of English, but it is broken English. And maybe sometimes the meaning of what he wants to say doesn't always come across. So that part will be interesting. But again, maybe not as high flying, not as high scoring as people thought it would. But it is a 2-0 start for the United States against Panama in our Houston, the people watching the Houston Coco Carrasquilla of the Houston Dynamo.
Laura, what do you think of this new era? First of all, the right choice at the right time, and is this what the U.S. men's national team needs to be a competitor, not only to be the best quote unquote in CONCACAF, although the three top teams arguably don't need to qualify for 2026. But what are your thoughts on this hire? And now the first step has been taken here in the great state of Texas.
I mean, I kind of disagree with Victor, of course, per usual. I think that you don't need to know perfect English to understand soccer. I think soccer is a language in itself, honestly. But yeah, there might be some loss in translation, but I think that he'll be fine. I do think that it's a perfect moment for a change, for a revamp. The men's team has been going through it for the last couple of years, and it really needed something new with all the, outside of the pitch kind of drama. So I think it's time to concentrate now so close to the World Cup that's going to be, in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada.
Now, when we talk about the U.S. men's national team, Victor, and Austin, Texas, this is a place where they're frequently more and more often. And we'll talk about Austin FC here in just a little while. Is this now the second home, the third home, a home for the U.S. men's national team? I think we're seeing a bit of a trend.
No, absolutely. I think it always was a strong market for the U.S. men's national team. I think when we saw matches here in Houston, you saw a big contingency from Austin traveling. Now they get to host them, and not just for the men, but also for the women's national team who will be there as well in a couple of weeks with Emma Hayes. So I do think it has become a host city, whether it be officially or unofficially. Austin here for the both national teams of the United States. And I know the National Training Center is going to go to Atlanta, Georgia. But again, I see many more games coming here through the Lone Star State via Austin to catch the U.S., which, again, I think looking over the history of games, the U.S. and Texas, we'd get one or two here in Houston or up in Dallas, but I think not as often as we would like. And that's going to be important for the U.S. teams.
We're nearing the end of the MLS regular season, and we'll talk about the Dynamo shortly. One match left. Austin FC dismissing their head coach, a team in transition, if you will. Victor, Austin FC, a team that started with such fanfare that literally had people waiting to buy tickets. And in the last couple of matches this season, it seemed like there wasn't much interest. Does it have to do with winning and losing? Is it that quote-unquote simple?
That's part of it, and certainly they're the market that was doing much better than with the MLS product, right? I know a lot of it has to do with the fact that they were an expansion team, but it is concerning the way it sort of dwindled much sooner than maybe expected. We've seen it over years in Houston, and I would even say up in Dallas as well with FC Dallas, Frisco, whatever y'all want to call it. So a move needed to be made. Austin Wolf is out. We'll see what coach they bring in, and certainly that'll mark the intentions of what this team is trying to do. But listen, part of it is they have a big fan base and a vocal fan base, and that I think if they didn't have that, you may have seen the club, sort of turn a deaf ear and try to keep Josh Wolf, because I do think he was good with ownership. I think he had maybe got an extra year more or than he would in other markets, right? But a move needed to be made, and now it'll be interesting to see what direction they take. And I think, again, when all the teams are strong in Texas, that just makes our sport much better.
Laura, you've been to Austin. You've seen the growth of that city in every shape and every form relative to the sport, to our sport. Austin FC, not only hosting national teams, I think it's a city that's vibrant and can definitely support this. What do you think Austin FC needs to do, beside winning, I guess, to continue receiving the support from fans?
I agree with what Victor said. I think it was
I agree
I
with
know,
Victor.
I know.
I
agree.
that.
I agree. I agree with what he said about.
Let's stop the podcast here.
Quote me, please. I do agree that I think the team did dwindle a little bit ahead of time of what we thought, and also with the sentiment of the fans. I think that the fans have been very vocal from the beginning, from like showing up and being there and selling out the jerseys and making banners and doing more and like really rallying into like supporting the team itself and kind of continuing to do that, but kind of saying, well, we're not going to show up if you guys don't do anything. So I think that was a good pressure of a team of being able to kind of pressure the leaders into making a change that was much needed, because if the change isn't, being done, it's going to dwindle and kind of be in the position of other teams that we know that, in the MLS that kind of like, plateaued in a sort of sense and kind of stayed in limbo or really bad positions for a long time.
I mentioned Austin and the community and the support and the growth of that city. For full disclosure, one of my daughters attends the University of Texas there. I say that because when I was younger, there are pictures of me as a baby there at the state capitol. My grandparents were there, and it's booming. It's booming in every shape, form. Although there's a bit of a backlash now in Austin because maybe people that came from California are saying, look, it's too crowded, it's too expensive. Oh, and by the way, the weather isn't the same as out on the West Coast. But also, and we're going to get to this transition if I can make it, the infrastructure continues to grow. The support, the building, the physical building of skyscrapers, of facilities, it continues to grow. And I think that the Austin FC team is prime for continued support there. In Houston, and that's the transition I wanted to make, there's an entity called the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. Victor, you know that entity. Laura, you know that entity. That entity is an entity that was established many years ago to basically work on the funding, the maintaining, and basically the overseeing of the stadiums for professional teams. And we don't think much about this and the need to have this, but these are multi-million dollar, if not billions of dollars spent on stadiums. In Houston in particular, you have the Toyota Center, you have Shell Energy, you have Minute Maid, and you have NRG Stadium for 4 of the professional teams. I think part of this is also the Houston Sabercats of the rugby world.
Major League Rugby.
Major League Rugby. Thank you. I should know that. We broadcast some of those games, Victor. I guess I forgot already. My point is that this entity, if you think about the foundation for all of this, including the upcoming World Cup, including what just happened at NRG last night with El Super Clásico from Mexico, and we can talk about that if you'd like. This entity is really there to support and service the sports in many ways. And just in the last few days, there was an announcement of a change, Victor, relative to its leadership, and that the leadership was not working out, and thus they had to replace the president. Victor, part of what was mentioned by Mayor Whitmire, who, again, this is an entity led by the county and the city, 2 different bodies that basically oversee it, was that we were not ready as a city or needed to be more ready for the World Cup. What's your take on this change? And then in a second, we'll talk about who now the interim president, leader of that organization is, someone that's well known to the sport of soccer. But what did you think initially, Victor, when you heard this news about the Harris County Houston Sports Authority leadership change?
Well, I saw that quote and I saw the, part of that. Well, I saw the entire press conference, actually. I went back and looked at it. And, if you just read the quote, it almost sounds like the Dynamo were influential in this move, right? But I think reading around different reports, it seems that all the professional teams in town weren't as happy with the direction of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority or just the way that things were going recently. So I think it maybe might have just been the last drop in the bucket, right? Again, because they're not as transparent with us, we can't, go much deeper into saying, well, what teams were asking for training grounds or what was the holdup? Where was the disconnect, right? That again caused this change. But again, there's been little to almost nothing, no movement. Again, we're less than 2 years to the World Cup, and what have we really seen as far as the local government in trying to promote sport, promote the World Cup coming here, taking advantage of the World Cup coming here? I mean, we heard all this at the beginning, right, about all these fields, the legacy of the game, what it was going to leave behind. I don't think we've seen that. Sure, the World Cup's going to come and go, but what is going to be the true impact that stays here? It's to be seen. But again, time is winding down.
Time is winding down. Apparently, Laura, again, what puzzled me, and I'm going to use that word in the announcement this past Friday, was that Mayor Whitmire mentioned soccer twice, specifically the World Cup were not ready, and that the Dynamo owner was in his office asking for help. I think that's a quote from Mayor John Whitmire. So there's several ways to look at this. Number one, look at the importance of soccer for Houston. It makes it very happy. And before then, I let you have the microphone. It was announced today that the interim lead now at the Houston or Harris County Houston Sports Authority is going to be Mr. Chris Kennedy, who's currently the president or lead for the 2026 Houston World Cup bid group, if you will. It's no longer a bid. It's a hosting committee, if you will. Someone that's well known to Houston, someone that was past the president of the Dynamo Dash organization. He's been around the MLS. So this speaks of the importance of our sport in the eyes of our community in general. So I'll turn it over to you about your thoughts of, number one, the importance of our sport relative to the announcement. And now that someone that is well versed in the sport of soccer is its leader.
Yeah, I mean, I think that naming him is interesting in a lot of aspects. I do think that there needed to be a change because I've been blessed to go around the world to different soccer tournaments, including a World Cup, several World Cups, and Copa Americas the Gold Cup as well. And honestly, since you get off the airplane, you see things that kind of hint and say you're, in Brazil, it was like Instagram or picture set thing that said, welcome to Brazil. And people knew that they're going to Brazil for, La Copa America, right? And when we had games here, the Copa America, like there was nothing really. There was nothing in the airports. There was nothing like when you were leaving. There was just like a little soccer ball, like maybe when you were leaving the airport, kind of mentioning it. And if you really want to sell Houston as a soccer location, as a soccer home, there needs to be little details like that say, yes, we're ready. Yes, we're happy to have it. And not just seeing this as a momentum to get money for the city, but really, really wanting to reel in people and the locals to really feel that passion for soccer. So I think that the change was due, one, maybe because Kennedy was successful, although I think it was a shoe in in my opinion, that Houston was going to be a location for several games of the World Cup just due to its history of different cups being here. So that was like an automatic duh for me. But, maybe people that don't know soccer, saw that he did a really good job and actually brought it in, which I don't know, like I'm not going to discredit what he's done. And then two, obviously knowing that perhaps maybe even looking at the Dynamo and the Dash, that they're not bringing a lot of people and they're supposed to be kind of like a beacon for the sport here in Houston. So maybe they wanted to ring their alarms, 2 years before the World Cup and say, hey, we need some help here because obviously we're not doing as well as we thought we were going to be doing at this point of the way. And
I know we'll be digging into more of this story, Victor, from the perspective of, well, what exactly does that mean? What kind of help did the owner of the Dynamo need or want, or did he go to Mayor Whitmire to request? And clearly with Mr. Chris Kennedy, who's got a history in the sport, history with the MLS, I think that raises the level of the importance of the sport. I think from my perspective, it'll be an interim, as he's currently interim, maybe a transition to find somebody else. But this entity, by the way, also has some history. Victor, you and I were talking about this off the air. Oliver Luck, who also has ties to the history of soccer in our city, was also associated with this entity and led it for some time. So it's an interesting change. I think I'm being told by many that it was a necessary change, but the target is short term, is the 2026 World Cup. Victor, why do you think this change happened? Meaning, is this the time to focus on the World Cup and we just were not ready? What is missing is what I'm asking myself.
I always go to it. I'm sure there was some money at play or maybe lost money. And that has to, again, without some transparency or more declarative statements, more elaborative statements, we're not going to know for sure. But the powers that be aren't going to make a move like this if they don't feel that it's necessary. I mean, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was 18 years. Janice Burke was the head of the Sports Authority.
That's correct. Janice Burke,
or
yep.
Involved with the Sports Authority, I should say. Maybe not the head of it, but as you mentioned, Oliver Luck used to be, I believe, we used to be the president of it before the Houston Dynamo came into town, and then he moved over with the Dynamo organization, and obviously a lot of fans still reminisce about the time when he was in charge. But Kennedy comes in. I don't know if 13 seasons in charge aren't necessarily. I'm going to disagree here with Mr. J. Kent Friedman, who was quoted, I believe, in the press release, and this is part of what I'm going to read from the Houston Chronicle. Chris has a proven track record of success here in Houston. Now, if that success is economical or if it's has to do with managing an investment property, which is what the Houston Dynamo, at least at the time, we now kind of look back in history and see that that's what it was while Kennedy was at the helm, then, maybe he did have success. But I think as far as growing the game, I can't sit here and lie to you and say that he did such a great job. Moving to the World Cup Bid Committee, I'm sure that was part of because of the context that he had as the president of the MLS club and overseeing the NWSL club as well, working with US Soccer because these entities are all tied in together. So it just, automatically, again, had those contacts and maybe made him and look, I think in the political hemisphere or environment, that's where he thrives. I mean, that's kind of where his position was. Maybe not so much a president of a soccer club. So maybe he's right where he needs to be. Time will tell. But obviously, also right place, right time to sort of ride in there as the interim while the World Cup also looms. And for better or not, it is a sport that he spent years in. Again, the success, I don't know. I'll leave that up in the air.
I asked myself, whom else, maybe Laura, should have been named to this position. I think there's a lot of elements at work here, not only the political side, like you mentioned, Victor. This is a political appointment. There's a board. So that's certainly a factor.
I will add, it has to be an important factor, and I don't mean to cut Laura off, but it has to be said. Chris Canetti and the Houston has been close to the Houston Dynamo in the last few years. He's been seen with Ted Siegel during games. He's been seen with Jessica O'Neill, so he has that close proximity. It isn't like he's been just over it. And I know they got to work together with the World Cup bid and all that, but it does seem like he's more in the fold. I wouldn't be surprised if the owner of the Dynamo, Ted Siegel, recommended him. So just sort of these things to keep in mind.
Laura, what that also tells me is the kind of leverage that the MLS have now in the politics of sports. And I see that as a plus for our sport. I think it speaks about our development and growth. Again, much older than both of you and some of you friends that haven't been around Houston. When I grew up, there was no MLS. There was no discussion of professional soccer. There were no soccer-specific stadiums. The other way to take all of this is now our leadership is led by people that have a experience in our sport, which only serves to grow it. But also we have a huge event coming up, which is the World Cup, and nobody wants to fall behind in that. So how do you see this playing out, Laura? Maybe if you look into your crystal ball about this new appointment, the change of the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. I want to make sure I get it right, and what that means relative to our sport.
I wish I had a crystal ball. I honestly wish I did. And then I would give a better, more fun, inside of response. But time will tell, and I'll leave it at that.
Time will tell, and we'll certainly stay on that story. So sticking in Houston and talking about the MLS, the Houston Dynamo, they have one more match left in regular season coming up here against the LA Galaxy at Shell Energy Stadium. Victor, this could be a preview potentially, 2 playoff-bound teams. What is at stake here relative to the seedings, the playoffs? How does Ben Olsen maybe finish out this last home game?
Well, they have the LA Galaxy, who are the top team in the Western Conference. I think they're still trying to clinch that last spot, which is all part of this decision day where the conference games are all simultaneous, right? I think it's an 8 p.m. start, if I'm not mistaken, unless they move it later on. But it'll be an important test, I think, as they try to go into the playoffs, because the Galaxy are going to be one of the teams contending for the title. Whether they face off in the earlier rounds is still to be seen. The Dynamo can't move higher than 5, if I'm correct, but they also won't go down to 8 or 9. So they're kind of in that, either 5, 6, or 7, depending on what happens, again, in the other matches. Austin's facing Colorado, so even though Austin's eliminated from the playoffs, they can maybe throw a wrench in their rivals' way, or not. We'll see. Davey Arnold's going to be the interim of that game after Josh Wolf got let go. But Colorado, if they get a win at Austin, they could move up over the Dynamo. And again, we'll see how this all pans out. I've seen promotions in social media of limited tickets remaining. So let's see if this is going to be. We haven't seen a sellout here in the past 2 years, I believe. I may have to be corrected on that. But it's been a long time since we've seen a sellout for the Houston Dynamo. If that's true, then maybe the star power of Marco Royce and the LA Galaxy could get that done.
Laura, 2 consecutive seasons that the Houston Dynamo under Pat Olmstead have gone to the playoffs. That was one of the GM's stated goals, no pun intended. They've achieved that. Is this enough? Meaning, is this continued success now for the team? How do we start from if we can, objective point of view, say, look, the Dynamo are headed in the right direction. Are they headed in the right direction?
I mean, yeah, but I don't know. I think of so many years of the team being subpar just to make it to the playoffs. For me, it's not enough. As simple as that. It's not enough. They need to win. And when they win, then we can have, this conversation again, and we can really say, do I really believe in what they're doing? Yes, I know there has to be a process. Yes, I know there's transitions, blah, blah, blah. But Houston tends to love that word of we're in a transition mode. I'm over it. Like as a reporter, as a fan, like as a Houstonian, like I think those transitions then need to be faster. They need to be swifter. They need to be seamless. I think that, we need to respect soccer a little bit more. And I think that unfortunately, Houston has not been a place that has been doing soccer properly or correctly or the way that it should be, knowing the diversity that we have and the talent, local talent that we also have here.
Victor, do you agree or disagree with that? What is success? Is the only thing that going to satisfy some, and maybe Laura is one of those some, is another MLS Cup? Is that sufficient proof of, hey, we're finally headed in the right direction? We have lived through years of this, the good back in many years ago, and the bad for many, many more years. So is the holy grail here another MLS championship? Will that be enough?
I don't think they have high chances because of the way they play. But I think that winning an MLS Cup, that's the only sign of success. I know people like to fall in love with the U.S. Open Cup. Look, they won the Open Cup last year, and what did it do for them? They haven't been able to grow the team. They haven't been able to grow the fan base. I mean, they're still, in many ways, repeating some of the same things they were repeating during the Canetti era to kind of tie everything all together. I've heard it over and over and over again from the Canetti era onto this new regime with Ted Siegel, and at the different levels. It can come from the GM, the coach, the players, that we just have to win, right? And we've heard it with the Dash too. We just have to win. Well, the Houston Dynamo, they're arguing, right? They've been winning. They're drumming it up. 2 straight playoff seasons. Well, where is the public reacting to that? So we'll see if they hopefully get a good crowd here against the LA Galaxy.
But Victor,
I hope they do.
Ben
I
Olsen,
will remind everybody that they didn't sell out during the playoffs last year when they had a couple of wins at home. So let's hope they put the marketing muscle behind it. But I don't think winning is enough. I think they need to win people over, get out in the community as well, but win people over with a soccer product, with something that represents Houston, and that proves more than just the mediocrity of getting into the playoffs, because unfortunately that is the measure of success in MLS.
I'm seeing Laura nod in approval, and maybe, friends, this goes deep to some of the frustration, or maybe a lot of the frustration that many of us have about the team's performance over the last decade plus. And that speaks of some of you don't even know who Dominic Kinnear is, the coach that led the team to championships. And it seems like a lifetime ago. I was blessed also to be covering the team back then. But Laura, it seems like that's part of ancient history. A new ownership group, new direction in many ways, and a lot of frustration. I'll ask you this, Laura, to maybe put you on the spot. Fans continue not to fill the stadium. Fans continue to have doubt. This takes time. And we'll talk about the youth sport in Houston in a little while. I know that break from the team happened because they used to have a Houston Dynamo Dash Youth Soccer Club that alienated a lot of people. Those are the words I'll use. And I know in the youth soccer community, that takes years, will take years, and a lot of time and patience to repair. Or for people simply, Laura, where I'm going with this is to forget. New people to Houston maybe have no idea, and they're happy with where the team is. Your take?
If you landed in Houston today, I don't think that the Houston would be the team that you're looking at. I think that the Dynamo and the Dash itself, the teams, the seasons haven't been good. Yes, the Dynamo went to the playoffs and they're playoffs right now, but it also has to bring excitement. You have to win big cups, the cup, the MLS Cup to make it. You need to win the NWSL Cup for people to remember. Yeah, the Open Cup is one that's there, but it's not as well known. Like maybe somebody looking from the outside, from a different country, will only look up the MLS Cup itself, the NWSL Cup itself, not the little other tournaments that are there.
Sure.
Not to, say that they're not valid in some, aspect. But if you're looking at it in the big picture, I think that it's important to do those kind of wins because people want to go see teams that win. People want to go see teams that are exciting. And, going into the I guess the dash side of it, I think that a lot of it has been out of the control of the players. But with the Dynamo, I do think that they've been pampered a little bit more, maybe given a little bit more than the dash itself. And they've gotten better in the last couple of years. But I still think that there's a lot of work to do within the organization itself to really make those teams, sell out every weekend.
Victor, is part of the effort of building excitement what just happened a few days ago with Tim Howard, a minority owner of the team, being in town? I have to ask the question, but your thoughts on Tim Howard representing the team and being here as a spokesperson, as a part of this organization, and basically promoting his team, his club?
Look, I love to see Tim Howard out there. The reason I laugh is because it's amazing to me how all these efforts come from everybody but the players on the field. And I think that's what the teams keep missing. Yes, Tim Howard is great. Yes, when James Harden makes his cameo at the stadium and or at the US Open Cup final, all that's great. Those are they don't have the same impact, unfortunately. And I know Tim Howard's a U.S. men's national team legend. And, again, it's great to see him, handing out marketing materials, handing out donuts, handing out coffees and shaking hands. Why isn't Hector Herrera doing that? Why isn't Alberto Carrasquilla? Why aren't the players of the Houston Dynamo being promoted in the community? Why aren't they going to local leagues and doing that? That to me was when, again, and people might say, oh, the Robertson years, that's all y'all guys go to. Yes, because Brian Ching, and this is, again, I say it again, Pat Onstad, I don't know how he's in that front office and he doesn't hammer it home. When they were in those years and they were basically shut out of San Jose, didn't have a home, came here, the city adopted them, but because they also went out and shook hands and it was a human connection that this current team doesn't have. If you just do it when people go to your stadium, that's not enough. That's not enough. And it's certainly not enough in the hole that this club has been for years. And the sad thing is that they don't want to acknowledge it, or they fail to acknowledge it. In the powers that be, from Pat Onstad to Jessica O'Neill to Ted Siegel, none of the people in charge put the importance on these kinds of things. And again, that's why the clubs are just doomed to repeat the same mistakes of the past.
Victor, the past is in the past, though. And I think one of the counter arguments I've heard is, listen, that was a long time ago. This is a different generation of fan. This is a different generation of even ownership.
Right, but Tim Howard alone is not going to get people to the stadium. I'm sorry. It's great to see him out there. It's great to see him making appearances. Tim Howard alone is not going to do it.
Laura, Tim Howard, a legend. Nobody can take away what he's accomplished. I don't know if you agree or disagree with Victor, but your take on these efforts from the team to get closer to fans and promote the Houston Dynamo in a very complicated market. I'm going to use that term, and if someone wants to press me on what that means, I'll say it. But Laura, is Tim Howard enough? Is this what the club needs to sell out that stadium, to get energy going into this last match before the playoffs?
No, it's not enough. I think that we all know that it's not enough. I think that it's a little mini step in the right direction, but I do think that more grassroots things need to be done. People need to feel connected to the players. I will say that at least with the Dash, I have seen quite a change in a lot of things that they're doing in the way that they're doing it. An example is that they held out the Dash. Several of the players went to like a soccer, like a soccer camp with young girls, like STEM. They called out several of teams here in Houston,
Sure.
which is something that they've done before, but I don't think they've voiced it or did so much. Even post it on their Instagram, go out there and have somebody take video and do like some interviews and kind of have like something to show for it. And the other one is also that they're doing more, letting the people see who the players are more in depth. So like recently, I think it was today that I saw two of the players, the Dash players, kind of sitting by, they were in a hotel and they were sitting like by a fire, and they're kind of like talking about what they like to do while they're on the road and what they like to talk about and some of the things that they do, and it kind of brings an insight to who the players are themselves and who the team is as well, and what makes that team special compared to other teams that they can, watch. So I think it's something that's in the right direction. Is it enough just to post on social media? Is it enough just to go to STEM things? Perhaps not. I think that there has to be more marketing included in that as well. But I think that at least in that, they've gotten a little bit better compared to other seasons, which is something that I always ask for. Like, I want more in-depth, more team, more personal things, to a certain extent, obviously respecting the players, but making it more personal for fans to feel connected.
And you'll help us make that transition then from the Dynamo to the Dash, the Houston Dash on the road in the next couple of days. I believe it's a 10-day game road trip. 10-day game road trip. I think I've got that right. And Laura, the first step was taken successfully with a victory over the team from San Diego, 2-0. It's defeating Maria Sanchez, the ex-player that was here in Houston, but a team that hasn't done well, that's not thinking playoffs this year, the Dash, but picking up a victory away from home is a positive step.
I think it is. I think it's good for getting some points there, maybe not finishing completely last. But it's not enough. They're not going to make it to the playoffs. I think that this season has been one to kind of just store away and not think about it, or maybe look at what went wrong. Again, I think that a lot of the players are doing the best that they can in situations that they perhaps are in. It's not like I'm saying, the players aren't working, because I see the players, go out there and sweat and run that humidity, try to do what they can. But, it's the players' job to do the best that they can do and to, learn who their rival is. But it's the job of the leaders, it's the job of the coaches to really be the ones that say, hey, this player goes with this player, and this player goes with this player, and this player can score, and then et cetera, et cetera. The players aren't the ones contracting their own, co-workers in a sort of sense. So I do kind of cut back, and I know Victor's probably saying, well, you're being too soft on them, but it is what it is. That's the way I think about it. I think that there is a limit to what players can really do to really make a big impact within the organization, within the pitch. They can go out there and do the best they can, but if the rest isn't there, then they're limited to what they can achieve with the tools that they're given.
On the field, the teams going in different directions. One heading into the playoffs again. We talked about the Dynamo, the Dash not headed in that direction. Victor, the Dash is a team that's starting from scratch, starting from zero in many ways, and maybe not zero, but certainly looking for a general manager, looking for, after that, I imagine, a new head coach, at least a permanent head coach, in the interim, trying to find a way to continue to sign players. This was not the season, and we've talked about this in previous Soccer Tejas podcast. This was not what was expected going into the season. What went wrong? Maybe we can summarize. It'll be my question to you, Victor. And what can go right? I think this can change quickly, question mark?
Well, we don't know what went wrong because we still have no clarity as to what happened with Fran Alonso as the head coach. From what we do know, it's that they, at the middle of the season, went into a different path. They weren't getting results as it was to begin with. So if you want to talk about the makeup of the roster, I think there was already things that were working against them, partly by their own cause. One of them is the Maria Sanchez situation. You had a disgruntled player who didn't want to be in Houston, who maybe was disgruntled before you re-signed her to a new contract, which of course came with a big pomp and circumstance about how great of a deal it was, and what was like the highest paid women's deal in women's soccer at the time. And
Right.
in the end, she didn't even stay. But I think there were signs along the way as to that a lot of things weren't working. And again, how much does the GM have to do with it? I imagine more than we probably know, because they fired her. That was their decision. So clearly they, whatever's going on with this whole, which we still don't know about. Again, Alonso's no longer the coach, but that was the big storyline of the season. What's going to come next year? Listen, I see a lot of moves being made, a lot of contract negotiations, right? New players that were re-signed. We just saw a young player that they signed also. I don't have her name on top of my head, but
Zoe
that's partly,
Matthews.
I think, because of the lack of the draft next year, which again is going to change some things. But all these moves, Alex, Laura, they don't even have a GM in place. They don't even have a coach in place. And maybe they do, and they just haven't told anybody. But if they really don't, right, which Ted Siegel, the owner, just said the other day in a media conference, that he's still interviewing GMs. And how are you making all these player moves towards next season when you don't even know who's going to be running things? And again, still to be seen, and we'll see what they decide. But I think from that aspect, I think they're still doing things wrong. But again, if they go out and hire somebody with top experience, as a GM, as a coach, then maybe things could turn around. I'm not.
Yeah, Laura, I'll come to you shortly, but I did want to clarify, and it's an interesting story, the signing of midfielder Zoe Matthews, the youngest player in the team's history at 17 years of age. At 17, I couldn't even tie my shoes. And players are getting younger and younger. Maybe we'll head in that direction quickly. And I know this was not on our rundown, Laura, but at 17 years old, it's a player that had originally committed to play at LSU. And they said, you know what, maybe the college game is not for me. And we'll talk NCAA soccer, Big 12 soccer in just a little bit. I know that a 17-year-old should have the opportunity in this and any other sport to make it a go. And we consider that success by many measures. But also there's pressure on players like this to perform. Might they be too young? And I think part of the whole structure now is who's going to be leading this team on the field next season. And what does that mean for a young player like Zoe Matthews? So, Laura, a lot to throw at you there. You can approach it however you want to. But at 17, were you ready to play professional soccer?
I mean, if I had the talent, Alex, please. Yes. I mean, I think that women, honestly, I think that women mature faster than men. So I do think that at 17, going on 30, probably she is ready mentally and has made plans if, she is that smart to see what she's going to do, because soccer is not forever. And like we see in a lot of the Dash players, they have other jobs, because in the beginning, you couldn't live off just the NWSL, as we well know that many of them had 2-3 jobs just to, be winning $45,000 a year, which is, you can't live with that in Houston. So I think that she knows the history. It's gotten better, but it's not as good as it could be. I think that age is good. It could, a coach, but there's no coach can really mold that player and really help them really see perhaps the talents that they don't know they really have. Because one thing is playing in college or high school, or, or in leagues. And another thing is really playing with women that have played internationally, with women that have, 10 years, 12 years under their belt. But, youth is something that's beautiful, and you can quickly adapt physically, mentally, and you really do need to have people on your side, on your bench, that can really guide you the right way.
Laura, you talk about youth and the beauty of youth. I'm the opposite on the screen right now, aging and the not so beauty. But you know what? I feel beautiful inside, which is all that matters.
Good.
Sticking with the NWSL. And we talk about, I think, positive news to most of us, the signing of a 17-year-old. And we talk about the team that the Dynamo just beat, San Diego, going through an issue going through some litigation of some disgruntled former employees. And this has become a little more prevalent in the NWSL, meaning disagreements that end up being legal. I don't want to say that it's symptomatic of the league. This happens in all walks of life. But is there something there about maybe the expectation of what things should be in the league? The NWSL, I think, has tried, Laura, to improve their profile relative to acceptance, to inclusion, to diversity. Does that maybe make it a target for some? And again, I'm not talking specifics here of the lawsuit. There were a lot of things that were alleged at San Diego. But is the league having to continue to deal with these matters maybe means it needs to continue to grow and mature and change maybe? I don't have the answer. It's more of a question. Your thoughts on this?
I do want to give a little bit of like a summary of what the, allegations that are going on. So it's basically, and I don't want to say disgruntled employees. I kind of want to say former employees, because if we say disgruntled, they might say like, they're upset because they got fired or, there's a line. So I think that I would say former employees of San Diego, I think there's 5 of them, and they're accusing the club of discrimination, harassment, and wrongful termination. That's kind of like the really short version of it. Now, to answer your question, I do think that the NWSL has tried to make it more transparent, more of a safe place to kind of say, this is what happened to me. This is what's going on. Why is it, coming to surface more? Maybe because it's so open and people feel that they're safe to go out there and, say, hey, this happened to me. Or it's something that was so bad in prior years that, it kind of just bottled up and everything just coming out to, to surface.
Right.
So I think there's several ways to look at it. I do think that if the NWSL is really truthful and really trying to make this a safe place for players, employees,
For
coaches,
everyone.
everyone to feel safe and say, hey, somebody harassed me, this is what they did, because we all know that unfortunately, in the NWSL, a lot of things were done that were not right. They were not paid properly. Players were treated incorrectly. There's, even a past coach in the Dash that we had players that, they said that the coach was cussing them out, treating them wrongfully, told them that they needed to lose weight, things like that. So I think that there needs to be a place for these players and employees to feel safe about it. Does it make it a target? I don't want to take it that way. I don't want to take it as that sense and say, I can get a quick book out of this. Let me just make this up. I want to believe that the truth is always going to, come out, whether it's true or not. I think that the truth always has to come out. And I think that if the NWSL is really trying to be a place of safety, they need to listen to all allegations and do the due diligence of investigating everything and any complaint that comes in.
Look, I think the safety of all people, of all of us, notwithstanding our background, who we are, what we believe in, is a priority in any entity, any organization, Laura, in any league, without a doubt. And if we're headed in that direction, I'm 100% behind the process. And sometimes the process can be ugly. Sometimes the process can be difficult. Sometimes the process can be embarrassing for many. But I firmly believe that in the end, you said it, the truth will come out. And you mentioned the lawsuit that's going on with a former coach of the Houston Dash and the league, which is yet to be resolved as far as I know. And we're talking about James Clarkson and his dismissal and allegations against him. And then I believe a suit filed by him and his representatives toward the league. And maybe we'll have to do a little research about where that stands. But also there has to be balance here, because allegations, Laura, as you know, can also destroy someone's career. And I'm not saying this about anybody or anything, but there is also a process if you're not guilty, if you have done the right thing. I think often you have to be given that opportunity. I think in this country we firmly believe innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, and I do want to add that who I said about the coach wasn't Clarkson. That's the trouble. That was another past coach
Right.
that wasn't Clarkson. So again, I think that if the NWSL is really going to do this, I think that it's something like you said. It's things like this happen in all walks of different jobs and walks of life. So I want to believe that the NWSL will do right by the people that are, being courageous and saying, "Hey, this is what's happening. We need to make it better." And I hope that other leagues also do that, because I'm sure it's happened in the MLS and the MLB and the NFL. I know it's happened, but they're more of a boys' club, hush, hush, hush. So I think that the NWSL is doing the right thing, and that's why I support it. I think that everybody needs to have a space to talk and feel safe to say their story. So I think that I wouldn't say that they're a target for these things kind of to happen. There's going to be more stories that pop up in the NWSL, because they're giving the path so people can really talk about it. And perhaps it doesn't happen in other leagues because there's no path to talk about it, so it's more hush hush.
Yeah, and we've heard in the media several scandals as of late that pertain to human beings being abused. I'm going to use it that way, and there is no room for that, zero tolerance. So we'll see where this lawsuit takes us. Victor, I didn't ask you about this lawsuit in the NWSL. Do you have a take on the process? And often this process, as I mentioned, is not pretty. Is also lengthy, and for it to be vetted completely is time consuming.
Yeah, I don't have much to add, honestly. I haven't looked at it enough. I've seen a few posts that were out there at first. It seems like it's multiple former employees, so maybe where there's smoke, there's fire. But we'll see this play out.
We'll see it play out, and we'll keep your friends informed here on the Soccer Tejas podcast. Let's stick a little bit to the women's sport, and I had the opportunity to call a Big 12 soccer match between U of H and the Arizona Wildcats, the Cougars versus the Wildcats. And it was a victory, finally, Victor, the first victory for Coach Jaime Frias in the Big 12. It's a program that continues to evolve and grow. You and I have talked about the U of H as a beacon for soccer in our community. We'll talk about the men's program more in further podcasts. But Jaime Frias is doing all the right things. Jaime Frias, to me, is a great leader, well respected. Sometimes you hit bad luck, but yesterday, finally, the first Big 12 victory, mathematically still a possibility to stay and reach, I should say, the Big 12 tournament. But how do you judge the season thus far, Victor? Only 3 games remaining. Points are needed. But in general terms, is the team not winning the season going to be potentially a blow to what Jaime Frias is trying to build? You think he'll be given more time?
Probably, because let's face it, U of H, the women's soccer program's not, where it probably should be as far as like other programs, as far as expectations. I don't think, if they don't make the tournament or, he's going to lose his job. Let's remember it's a new conference. He's still adapting, recruiting, all these things. Again, it's not like he's coaching at a UT, for example, right? But that remains to be seen. Maybe the athletic director has higher expectations and maybe does make a move, or maybe does say, hey, you got a couple recruiting classes already. You gotta get better results. To be seen, but ultimately progress, right, is what we want to see with the college system. And hopefully the U of H can finish the season here off with a couple of wins. I will say, now that we talked about the NWSL, the draft not being part of that process anymore, we'll see if the local, if the dash, locally, maybe looks more into some of these local programs as well. U of H, Texas A&M, UT, all the other soccer programs around this region, as far as recruitment of their players for the professional game.
Laura, U of H, I think, again, can be really an important factor for soccer in our community, serving as a place where young players can dream one day of being and growing and having great competition. Victor just mentioned something which is tremendous. Also being maybe a great place for opportunity for the next level. How do you see the program in general now that we get close to the end of the season? And with this victory yesterday, there's some optimism. But in general terms, how do you see U of H women's soccer in the last couple of seasons?
I mean, I think that they've been doing a good job. I think that this season there was a lot of things that were out of the control of the coach of Frias. He had some students that left, some injuries, a lot of new students coming in. So I think it was kind of, again, a transitional period perhaps for the team, something that Houston seems to like to do. But it's very natural. I think that he is a good coach. I do think that he's a good leader. If I was in the position to leave him, I think I would, because I would want to see where he can take this, because I don't agree when coaches are taken out like every season. If you have a new coach every season, it's also going to, it's going to cause some kind of impact to the team as well. I also don't believe in staying with the same coach for 4 or 5 seasons if there's no results. There has to be progress within those seasons. So we'll just have to see what happens next season. I think that if he wins the next games that he has, I think that he'll be in a good position to say, it wasn't the best season, but I see that the team is growing and I'm having I'm creating a culture here.
Culture. A lot of culture is, or that word is used a lot in building any program. I'll give you my quick take on U of H. I think the women's side is doing well. It's getting noticed. Even in the losses they had, there were lapses for a few minutes. There were moments when maybe they weren't playing at a high level. But I love that Coach Jaime Frias has been focused on the process. Yesterday, after the match, he says, look, I believe in the process. I think the question, Victor Lauda, always becomes, how long do you give something like this? Is the standard different if this were the Dynamo? Is the standard different if this were the Dash? Is the standard different if this is the national team? Do you give yourself 6 months, a year, 3 seasons, 4, 5 seasons? Different leadership have different, I imagine, criteria for determining how long you allow the process to go on. But without a doubt, U of H, at least to me, this season, doing well, and maybe mathematically by some miracle, they'll be able to accumulate enough points to make it into the Big 12 tournament. We'll keep you updated on that. A quick take as we kind of wrap up our Soccer Tejas podcast, Victor and Laura, in the youth side of the sport. I had the opportunity to speak to the president of STAISA in a new series of podcasts that we're calling The State of Soccer. I'm talking about Charles Rotramel, the president of the South Texas Youth Soccer Association. And he talked about how in youth soccer, certainly in South Texas, about 10 years ago, there was a separation, a break because of philosophical differences, and how there might be a reunification in the next, hopefully, couple of years to bring everyone under the same umbrella on the youth side. What that schism, that break that has caused Laura and Victor, in my opinion, is that it's the Wild West when it comes to regulation. It's the Wild West when it comes to leagues, to where to brands. You have brands like the ECNL, the MLS, the GA. You have the ODP, and parents, in my opinion, and in Charles's opinion, I encourage you to go to the podcast, are confused about where they should place their kids. Laura, I guess my question to you is, in the youth market, I know in Houston, we have so much diversity, and not necessarily in a good way. Everyone believes they have the best league. Everyone believes they have the best pathway, whether it be to college or to professional. Everyone runs it the way they want to. Some run it pay to play. Some run it free of charge. Some run it, I'm going to say this, in non-regulated leagues. They aren't even affiliated with the USSF. It is the Wild West from my perspective. But Laura, is the pathway to reunification in getting together in a room and talking about these things, is that ever possible? Laura, I'll go to you first on that topic.
Yeah, I think that there needs to be some type of unity, because there needs to be rules and certain things and, like checklists and things like that. I'm going to tell you about a story a couple of years back. I know I used to work at a newspaper, and I had a parent email me and say, I heard that it was Monarcas, a team that Mexico. I heard that Monarcas has a league here in Houston. I paid $500, and I contacted Monarcas and I talked to them, and they're like, no, we do not have an official league in Houston. So what I'm saying is that it opens up a lot of issues for parents that just want their kids to be, perhaps in a league, a soccer team league that they know of, but they don't know. So they try to go for familiar names, whether it be Chivas, whether it be, Madrid or Barcelona or, the Dynamo or whoever, but how do they know it's legitly? Because, scammers scammers are scammers, and they find different ways to make people believe things. So I think that making the unification, I think, would make it less easier for the scammers to do what they're trying to do, and make it easier for parents to know that the children are following certain steps that are mandated by a union to say, this is what needs to be done. This is, what will help this child eventually evolve to, play this or that, or, different things, rules that need to be done. I do want there to be liberty for either the leagues to have their own, core, and say,
Sure.
we're community character and different things like that, like a lot of teams have. So I think that it's important to have diversity, but I think that there has to be one, like a Bible in a sort of sense for soccer leagues.
Victor, I know that the word regulation means different things to different people. In this country, I think, as in most countries, no one wants to be regulated. No one wants to be told what to do and how to do it. The freedom of choice, to me personally, is important. When Charles Rotremel mentioned the word regulation, is it possible to regulate the youth soccer market? And I'll be very specific. There are affiliated leagues with the U.S. Soccer Federation. But Victor, you know this. Laura, you know this. I go back to my point. There are so many Latino-centric leagues that aren't affiliated with anyone but themselves. They make and break their own rules. I'll put it that way. And they don't want to be regulated. They have their own fields. They're their own independent entities. They have quality based on what they feel is a priority. Should everyone be regulated under U.S. soccer? I don't know if that's necessarily the answer. I think maybe a pathway toward following the same rules and guidelines. And Victor, establishing a tier and different tiers of competition, is that what we want? Is that even possible within our lifetime?
Well, I'd like to know more about what necessarily means by being regulated, because look, as businesses, there's already certain regulations, right, legally, under those terms. As soccer leagues, I would say whatever makes the game. This has nothing to do with unification or not. Whether whatever happens there. My point is, whatever makes it more accessible, whatever makes the game more accessible. I think that's the answer. A lot of these leagues, like you say, you're right. They don't want to be associated with U.S. soccer, or maybe in this case which would be below that, the regional arm of it, which is the South Texas
Youth Soccer, right?
Youth Soccer Association. So, but why is that? Is it because it's too expensive to be affiliated? Are there certain what necessarily is pushing them away from joining, and being part? Because I think if it's just about being acknowledged by U.S. soccer, I think there would be more of those leagues that are interested, especially if there's the olive branch extended, right? Maybe a lack of education of that process is something that's holding them back. But I do think a lot of times it is also, is there an economic hurdle behind it? So I think in that sense, if you want to make the game more accessible and open it to those leagues as well, I think that's for me, that's the answer.
Victor, I'll hit you with the last one on youth soccer, and maybe just a brief yes or no, and maybe a little bit of explanation. Solidarity payments. I think we're both well aware of what that means. In other countries, clubs with the pathway to professionalism are compensated if someone in their academy, if someone at 10 years of age was developed, and they eventually sign a professional contract. Do you think the United States is ready today to say that any local club that has an 8, 9, 10-year-old should sign a contract, regardless of ability, in case they go to the next level and in case they get compensated, that the club that they played for when they were 10 should be rewarded financially for that signing? Are we ready for that, Laura, in this country? And what does that mean? I'll tell you this. I think right now it's already happening at college sports. NIL, the portal, these are professional athletes. And what I mean by that is they're being compensated for their work. There's nothing wrong with that. So does that mean now high schools will be able to pay? Think about it. It went in professional American football. It went from the NFL. Now it's down to the NCAA Div 1 schools that are compensating their athletes. I think high schools are next. If you follow that logic, local clubs in Houston, in Texas who have 10-year-old kids are going to have to be compensated because this is a business. Am I looking at it, Laura, the wrong way?
No, I think you're right. I think that might be the future. But I think that perhaps in the next 5 years, that's something that I would say I feel comfortable that it could be done. I do know that whether it's legal or not, I know that a lot of children do get paid to play in leagues because I've lived it. I've seen it. I've seen kids say, the parents, hey, I'm going to pay you $50 because one of the other players in this other league is sick. Can you bring this child to play? So it's being done, whether it's legal or not legal. But I do think for it to be fully properly done maybe the next 5 years, because I do think that there needs to be, again, regulations. And like Victor said, we need to learn more about what regulations they want to do,
Right.
but some kind of unification for it to be fair for the children, for it to be fair for the parents, and for soccer not to just become a money thing, because that would be very unfortunate. I don't want it to become that, because an example, like when I was in high school, these leagues were asking for $3,000 a season. And my parents couldn't pay that. Maybe I could be a big star, but I wasn't able to be developed, and I don't want
You
that
are
to
a
happen
big
to
star.
the children.
You are a big
soccer
star.
star. I am. Yeah, I'm a journalist star, but not a soccer star. Perhaps I would have been, I don't know, a big name out here, and I wouldn't be, here. I'll be next to Marta talking, drinking coffee.
That's right.
And not doing the podcast.
Instead,
But
you're next to Victor. So, yeah, you got a ways to go. Victor, the same thing. Is amateurism disappearing, and is that the right pathway?
Look, I think to answer your question about solidarity payments, it's a rule under FIFA, and it happens everywhere else in the world. I don't see why it shouldn't happen here, based off of those rules. And I think it would even help in some cases, because that's been, and I can speak to you at least locally, that's been a big problem with the Houston Dynamo. And as you mentioned, with all the burnt bridges with the local clubs, because when a team like that tries to just go and poach talent, you're right, there isn't anything protecting the smaller clubs, right? Now we've seen some sort of solidarity payments. I think we've started to see with MLS clubs, but does it go further than that? I don't think it is. And I don't see it going that way either, because, it's kind of like promotion relegation in this country. Some things are already sort of set in stone. It seems like it's going to take a huge effort to turn things back to maybe what would be the foundation in other countries with the sport. I'd like to see it. We'll see if that happens. And because I do think some of these clubs do deserve compensation for helping the development of certain soccer players. Yeah, of course. And it would help grow those leagues as well.
It would. So I know that's another pending topic that we'll be returning to throughout these podcasts. And friends, what do you think? Should a 10-year-old start signing a contract in this country and have that freedom to develop, to become a 17-year-old signing for the NWSL, or to become an Alex Parra, old and never making it to the next level, but just continuing to dream? That's a question for you, friends. You can find us on social media, and please offer us your opinion. Before we go, let's leave with some last thoughts. And Laura, I'll go with you first. Your thought of the week. What are you looking forward to? What are you looking in the rear view mirror about? What's on your mind relative to our sport?
I'm very interested to really see how Houston is going to amp it up for the World Cup. I've seen what it's done for different cups, but not for the World Cup. And I want to see freaking banners everywhere that has the logo of the World Cup. I want to see Instagram, TikTok, everything influencers being too excited. I want to see us being invited to exclusive things that have to do with the World Cup. I want it to really show what really soccer is all about, which is something that I have not felt in the different cities that I've gone in the U.S. I want to feel like soccer is king in the U.S. because it's getting the money. So I want the ambience to be here as well.
I like that take on the World Cup. Let's blow it up, right? Let's blow it out of the water, if you will. Victor, what's on your mind these days?
I'm looking forward to that game this weekend. The Houston Dynamo hosting the LA Galaxy. I hope limited tickets do remain, and I hope they fill that stadium up. I think it's time. It's time to get after it. Put the marketing muscle behind it, or whatever it is you have to do. again, we'll see if maybe the Ben Olsen letter will have won some more people, but ultimately it's time to fill up that stadium. It's been too long. It's not just winning. It does have to do a lot with more community impact, but I think let's see that connection grow. Let's see if it starts here with this game.
We'll see if the Houston Dynamo can pick up a victory in the last home match and certainly build into the playoffs. We've got to go. Friends, it's time to say adios, hasta luego, adieu, good night. That's the way we're going to say it. Before we go, Laura, thank you. You're amazing. And you are a star, by the way. Not as big a star as Victor.
A star is a star.
A star is a star. Exactly. Victor, also thank you for all you do. You guys are amazing. You know about the sport and you follow it as true sports journalists. So, friends, on behalf of all of us, on behalf of Laura, on behalf of Victor, I'm Alex Parra. Thanks for joining us. Please stay tuned to more of the Soccer Tejas podcast. Send us your opinions. Send us your comments. We want you to participate. So, on behalf of all of us, have a great day. Until next time, when we meet here on the Soccer Tejas podcast.